"Don't touch that piano!" The shout sliced through the ballroom like a blade. The quartet stopped mid-measure. Conversations died. All eyes turned. Standing at the edge of the grand Steinway, wearing yellow rubber gloves and a crisp black uniform with a white apron, Amara Daniels slowly pulled her hand back. She hadn't touched the keys, just wiped a streak of dust from the polished black lid. But that didn't matter. Richard Langston was already approaching, tuxedo sharp, ego sharper, laughing loud enough for the room to hear. "Someone get a picture of this," he called out, sweeping his arm toward her. The help thought she was headlining tonight. A ripple of laughter passed through the crowd. Guests in glittering gowns and tailored suits leaned in, intrigued, amused, entertained. Amara didn't move. She stood still, her expression unreadable. She'd learned a long time ago that stillness made her invisible faster than apologies did. Richard stopped in front of her, still grinning. "Tell me," he said, tilting his head mockingly, "are you classically trained in housekeeping, or just winging it?" More laughter. A few phones came out. Someone whispered, "Is this real?" Amara looked at him. "I was wiping a fingerprint off the lid, sir." Her voice was calm, but not small. Richard raised both eyebrows. "Oh, she speaks," he said. "Impressive." He turned to the guests again. "Well, you all know how much this baby cost. Steinway and Sons, Model D. $200,000. And we nearly lost it to a bottle of pledge and a dream." Amara said nothing. She glanced down at the piano briefly, not with fear, but with a quiet, unreadable weight. The way someone might glance at an old photograph just before putting it away. Richard followed her gaze. "You know what?" he said suddenly, eyes narrowing with mock curiosity. "Can you play?" The pause. The room leaned in. Amara's eyes lifted. "I used to." "Oh," he exclaimed, clasping his hands. "Ladies and gentlemen, a twist in the story." He walked in a slow circle around her, like a ringmaster showing off the next act in a circus. "Well then," he said, turning toward the audience, "how's this for entertainment?" He pointed at Amara. "If she can play that piano, play it better than a professional, I'll marry her." A stunned gasp. A sharp laugh from the back. "Right here. Tonight," he added, turning back to her. "You have my word." The cameras were up now. The room buzzed with cruel delight. A woman near the champagne bar whispered, "This is wild." Amara didn't flinch. Her eyes didn't waver. She asked one question. "If I can, will you keep your word?" The laughter stalled for half a beat. Richard blinked. Then smirked. "Absolutely," he said. "Scout's honor. But I hope you've got more in your fingers than Windex." He turned back toward the crowd, soaking in their amusement. "Place your bets, everyone. We've got a maid with a mop and a mission." Amara slowly removed her gloves. The room noticed. Some guests chuckled. Others whispered. But a few, very few, watched her with something different. Not humor. Curiosity. She folded the gloves neatly and placed them on the corner of her cleaning cart. Her hands were smooth, precise. Her every motion deliberate. She stepped closer to the piano. A man in a white dinner jacket stepped in front of her, half joking, half blocking. "Careful," he said. "Don't break anything." "I won't," she said quietly. A security guard hovered at the edge of the crowd. His eyes followed her, ready to intervene if the joke went too far. From across the room, Miss Gloria, head of housekeeping, watched silently, a pack of tissues still tucked into her belt. Her jaw was tight. Amara paused at the bench. She didn't sit. Not yet. Instead, she looked at the instrument, really looked at it, as if greeting something she hadn't seen in years. The curve of the lid, the gold-lettered name at the center. The light catching on the edges like memory. She reached out, slowly, and rested her fingers on the keys. The room held its breath. "Wait," Richard called out again. "Before you butcher my piano, let's be clear." He stepped forward. "If you can play a full piece, flawlessly, I'll keep my word." A woman near the stage added, "She lasts more than 30 seconds, I'll put 500 on it." Laughter. Cheers. Another voice shouted, "Make it 1,000 if she plays with both hands." Richard nodded dramatically. "Deal." You all heard it. One piece. One miracle. And she gets me. He winked. The audience roared. Amara didn't smile. She sat down. And in that moment, between the absurdity and the silence, between the cameras and the polished floor, a shift began. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was real. Not in the piano yet, but in the air. In the way Amara Daniels, former prodigy, current invisible, placed both feet flat on the floor and straightened her back. She wasn't here to win a man. She was here to reclaim her name. Amara sat down at the piano bench without hesitation. She didn't look at the crowd, didn't smile, didn't flinch. Her focus was locked on the instrument. She removed her gloves, folded them neatly, and set them beside the bench. Her posture was straight, her breathing even. She placed her hands above the keys and waited, not for permission, but for silence. Richard Langston stood near the edge of the room with a smug grin on his face. "Let's go then," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Show us what you've got. Just remember the deal, you've got to be better than a pro." A few people chuckled. One man called out, "You've got 30 seconds." Another woman joked, "Don't break the keys, girl." Someone raised their phone to record. More followed. Faces turned, eager to see the fall. But Amara didn't respond. Her fingers came down softly on the first note. Precise. The sound traveled further than expected, carried by the quiet that settled over the room. She played another note. Then another. And the melody took shape. It was summertime, but not the version most knew. Her phrasing was slower, more deliberate. She added space between the notes, letting each one land and fade. It wasn't performance. It was control. Every key she pressed sounded intentional, steady, grounded. At first, the audience waited for her to stumble. But she didn't. As the music continued, the energy in the room shifted. The laughter died down. Conversations stopped. The phones kept recording, but no one was laughing anymore. The maid was playing. And she was good. Davidson entered through the side door. He hadn't been invited but came after seeing the viral clip spreading online. He moved quietly through the edge of the crowd and stopped when he saw Amara at the piano. His eyes narrowed slightly. He recognized the model. Steinway & Sons Model D. A true concert grand. But he didn't recognize the woman. He turned to the guest beside him and asked, "Who is she?" "She's one of the maids," the man whispered. Langston dared her. David kept watching. Amara moved into the second section of the piece. Her left hand kept the rhythm steady while her right hand floated over the melody. She wasn't adding unnecessary flourishes. No dramatics. She wasn't trying to impress. She was simply playing the way someone plays when they know exactly what they're doing. Some guests were still standing. Others had quietly taken their seats again. The noise had died out completely. The room was listening now. A young server at the back, holding a tray of empty flutes, stopped mid-step. One of the security guards slowly lowered his hands from his crossed position. The music continued. Richard shifted his weight from one leg to the other. His grin had faded slightly, but he was still pretending to be amused. "She's all right," he said to no one in particular. "Nothing special." But no one responded. Amara reached the bridge. Her timing was perfect. She bent 2 notes slightly, adding emotional tension. The phrasing was tight, not too fast, not too slow. She played with the ease of someone who had done this for years, not someone who worked behind the scenes cleaning floors. Davidson took out his phone, not to film, but to take notes. "Excellent tone," he typed. "Strong pedal control. Intentional silence. No wasted motion. Professional-level phrasing." He looked up again. The room was frozen. Near the kitchen entrance, Gloria Johnson stood still, one hand resting on the edge of a tray. She watched Amara with quiet pride. She had seen something in the young woman months ago. Tonight confirmed it. As Amara reached the final section, she didn't slow down dramatically. She didn't hold the last note for applause. She finished with restraint, cleanly lifting her hands from the keys as the final sound faded into the air. No bow. No gesture. Just stillness. For a moment, no one moved. Then a single person clapped. Then another. Then the room erupted. Applause filled the hall. Some guests stood. Others nodded, clearly impressed. Even the ones who had laughed earlier were now silent or clapping. David Chin typed one more line into his phone. Confirmed. Above professional standard. No question. Amara stood up and turned toward Richard. She didn't smile. She didn't look triumphant. She simply said, "I kept my part. Will you keep yours?" The applause didn't stop, but it softened enough for everyone to hear her words. Richard straightened his jacket, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You're serious?" "You made the offer," Amara said. "You said it in front of everyone. And you confirmed it before I played." Richard glanced at the phones still recording. Some guests had turned toward him now, curious how he'd respond. He chuckled, trying to regain control. "Well, that was impressive. Really. But marriage? Come on. You know I was joking." A few gasps. A few frowns. David Chin looked up from his phone. His voice was calm but loud enough. "You said, and I quote, 'If she plays better than a professional, I'll marry her.' You made it a public condition. She met it. Everyone here saw it." Richard tried to laugh again, but it came out strained. "What? You people want me to walk down the aisle right now?" A woman near the front crossed her arms. "You challenged her. She won. You said you'd keep your word." Someone shouted from the back, "Keep your promise." Amara didn't speak again. She simply stood, hands at her sides, waiting. The room grew quiet again. The cameras turned to Richard. He was cornered and he knew it. Richard stayed still, his smile tight. Dozens of eyes were on him. Some expected a joke. Others wanted a decision. The phones were still recording. Amara didn't move. She didn't look down. Her tone had been calm, respectful, but it carried weight. The kind that couldn't be laughed off. "I said what I said," Richard muttered. "But come on. No one here thought I meant it literally." A man near the piano spoke up. "You said it loud and clear. If she plays better than a pro, you'll marry her." She did. Now what? Richard exhaled through his nose and adjusted his cufflinks. "Are we really doing this?" "It was a joke." David Chin stepped forward. "A public promise isn't a joke when it's made on camera, with witnesses, in front of a room full of donors, executives, and press." Richard glanced at him. "You're a reporter?" "I'm a music critic. And I know exactly what I saw and heard." More guests nodded. One woman whispered, "He's right." He challenged her to embarrass her. She embarrassed him instead. Gloria stood quietly behind the catering table. Her face was still. Her hands were folded. She didn't speak, but her presence said enough. Richard cleared his throat. "Let's not overreact. She's clearly talented. I'll happily support her career, donate something to—" Amara interrupted. "I don't want your money. I want your word." That hit hard. He looked at her again, this time longer. She didn't blink. Her eyes weren't angry or smug. Just steady. He turned to his PR coordinator, who was now at his side. She leaned in and whispered fast. "It's already on Twitter. The challenge. The performance. People are quoting you. How bad is it? Trending fast. And not in your favor." He looked around. The people who were laughing earlier weren't laughing now. Some were frowning. Some looked disappointed. A few looked ready to walk out. "All right," Richard said, holding up a hand. "Let's all calm down." No one responded. He turned back to Amar. "You proved your point. You embarrassed me. I admit it." "I didn't do this to embarrass you," she said. "You offered the deal. I accepted. I followed through." Richard paused. "So what are you asking for exactly? You want a ceremony? You want to be Mrs. Langston?" "I want you to show that your word means something," Amara said. "That what you say in front of a room full of people isn't just for show." David Chin nodded. "This isn't about romance. It's about dignity." A guest near the front added, "and accountability." Richard looked at the crowd. Then back at Amar. "All right, you want me to keep my word? Let's talk." "Not behind closed doors," someone called out. "You made the offer publicly. You settle it publicly." He turned toward his PR rep again. She whispered, Do not confirm intent to marry. Redirect to action. Offer support, not relationship. Shift the narrative. He nodded once, took a breath, then addressed the room. Fine. Tonight got out of hand. I said something in the heat of the moment, and she shocked all of us. I don't take back the challenge. She played like a professional, maybe better. I respect that. Some applause broke out. He continued, marriage is serious. I won't fake one for a spectacle. But I'm willing to make a real, public commitment that reflects the spirit of what I said. Someone asked, like what? He turned back to Amar. You tell me. What would prove I'm serious without turning this into a circus? She answered immediately. Start by saying my name. He paused. Your name? You called me Maid, sweetheart, and a lot of other things tonight. Say my name. Richard straightened. All right. What's your name? She met his eyes. Amara Daniels. He nodded, then turned to the room. Her name is Amara Daniels. And tonight, she reminded me that talent, discipline, and dignity don't wear tuxedos. Sometimes they wear aprons. That line landed. The crowd was quiet, but attentive. Amara spoke again. You want to make it right? Make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to someone else. He nodded slowly. Meaning? Call your staff by name. Don't block them from being seen. Don't silence them. And use your platform to lift people who've been ignored. He looked at her. What do you want from me personally? I want you to support change that lasts. Not just gestures. A beat passed. Then she added, and you can start by listening. Richard didn't answer immediately. He turned to the crowd, took a breath, and then looked back at Amara. All right, let's talk. Tomorrow morning. You and me. My office. We draft something real. Scholarship fund. Performance series. Policy changes. Whatever makes this more than just a headline. Why not now? Someone asked. He shook his head. Because I want it done right. Not rushed. Amara studied him. Then nodded once. Then I'll be there. Davidson looked around the room, then back at his phone. He started typing the headline in his notes. From mockery to mandate, Amara Daniels plays the room into accountability. The applause started slowly. Not wild, but steady. Some were clapping for the performance. Others for the promise. Richard stepped back. Amara walked past the piano, past the phones, past the stairs. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She just left the stage. And for the first time that night, the crowd moved aside to let her pass. Richard led Amara down a hallway lined with portraits and plaques. 2 security guards flanked them at a distance, but no one said a word. The gala noise faded behind thick walls. They reached a dark wooden door marked Operations. Richard opened it and held it briefly. Amara stepped inside. The office was sleek, glass desk, leather chairs, branded bottled water. Everything designed to impress. Richard walked around the desk but didn't sit. Neither did Amara. His PR manager entered behind them. She carried a tablet and a notepad. We need to handle this quickly, the PR woman said. The story's already moving. Richard looked at Amara. I didn't bring you here to insult you. You played better than anyone expected. I'll admit that. I didn't come here to hear compliments, Amara replied. Then what do you want? A press conference? A payout? I want structural change. Richard raised an eyebrow. Define that. You want to keep your word without marrying me? Fine. Start by acknowledging what tonight exposed. He waited. You used your power to humiliate someone you thought was beneath you. That happens to people like me every day. You want to fix it? Put your money, name, and company behind something that matters. The PR manager glanced between them. We've prepared a list of possible gestures. I'm not interested in gestures, Amara said firmly. Richard crossed his arms. Then be specific. Amara stepped forward. 3 things. First, a scholarship fund for underprivileged music students. Call it the Daniels Fund. Not in my name. In honor of my mother. Richard nodded slowly. That's doable. Second, a performance program. Free concerts in underserved communities. Not sponsored for brand exposure, sponsored for access. PR tapped her tablet. We can structure that quarterly. Third, Amara said, change your company's internal policies. Staff can be seen. Third, no more banning employees from public areas. No more use the service elevator rules. And no more pretending like we don't exist. Richard didn't answer right away. He looked down at the desk. Then up again. Is that it? No. That's the minimum, Amara replied. You'll announce it yourself. Publicly. And you'll say you were wrong. The room went still. Richard's jaw clenched. You want me to admit fault in front of cameras? Yes. That's the point. He paced for a second, then stopped. If I do this, you'll stand beside me? I won't be your shield, Amara said. But I'll confirm the truth. PR spoke up. We can spin this positively if you frame it as leadership growth. Amara turned to her. Don't spin it. Own it. The PR woman said nothing. Richard sighed. Fine. You'll get the scholarship, the concert series, the policy review, and I'll speak. But we do it on my terms. One event. One message. You help write it. Amara nodded once. Fair enough. But don't think of this as a fix. It's a start. Richard extended a hand. She didn't take it immediately. You're serious about following through? She asked. Yes. She shook his hand, briefly. PR opened the door. We'll draft the press points. Event will be set for next week. You'll both appear together. We'll clear language with legal. Richard looked at Amara again. One more thing. Why not take the money and walk away? Most people would. Amara stared at him. Because most people never get the chance to make people like you listen. I'm not wasting it. She turned and walked out first. This time, no one stopped her. The press conference was set for Friday afternoon. The venue, the Langston Atrium, the largest public space in the company headquarters. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, and 2 grand pianos flanking the stage. Richard Langston stood behind the podium, adjusting his tie as the crowd settled. Reporters from every major outlet had shown up. Social media buzzed for hours before it even began. Amara stood to the right of the stage. Not hidden. Not dressed like staff. She wore a simple black blouse and slacks. No jewelry. No makeup. She wasn't there to impress. She was there to be seen. Richard cleared his throat. Cameras rolled. Good afternoon. I want to begin today with something simple. I was wrong. Guess. Shifts in the audience. Last week, I made a remark at a private gala that should never have been said. I mocked a member of my staff. I belittled her. And when she responded with brilliance, I tried to save face. But today, I'm not here to spin that moment. I'm here to confront it. He looked at Amara. Amara Daniels is not just an employee. She is a world-class musician. She is a woman of integrity. And she exposed something I needed to see, not just in myself, but in the culture I've allowed to grow within my company. He turned back to the press. Starting today, we are launching the Daniels Music Initiative. It includes a full scholarship fund for underprivileged youth, a mobile concert program to bring classical music to forgotten communities, and an internal reform across all Langston properties to ensure that every staff member, regardless of role, is treated with dignity and humanity. The beat. This isn't charity. This is correction. The room fell silent. Then hands shot up. Mr. Langston, is this an admission of corporate bias? Yes. And it won't be solved overnight. But this is the first step. A second reporter, Miss Daniels, why didn't you walk away after the gala? Amara stepped forward. Because walking away changes nothing. Standing here forces the conversation. A third voice. Do you believe this gesture is enough? No. I believe it's a beginning. And I'll be watching what happens after the cameras stop. Another, will you be part of the initiative's leadership? Yes. Not for visibility, but for accountability. The room stirred. Some clapped. Others typed. David Shin, the critic, stood in the back. He said nothing, but he smiled. After the press event, Richard approached Amara near the stairs. You held your own up there. So did you. You still think I should have married you? If you had, the company might have been in bigger trouble. He laughed, the first real laugh since the gala. I want to ask you something, he said. Off the record. She raised an eyebrow. Go ahead. Would you ever consider performing again? Professionally? Amara didn't answer right away. She looked out the glass wall to the plaza below. People were gathering around a screen broadcasting the event replay. I didn't stop because I lost interest, she said. I stopped because no one ever thought I belonged on the stage. You proved them wrong. One performance doesn't erase years of being invisible. No, but it shines a light. And that's something. He extended his hand. Whatever happens next, you've got backing now. Real backing. She didn't shake his hand this time. She looked him in the eye. I never needed backing. I needed access. There's a difference. Then she walked away. Richard watched her go. Then turned back to the cameras, now turned off, but still pointing his way. The following week brought headlines, interviews, and a whirlwind of attention. Hashtag Play Like Amara. Hashtag Daniels Initiative. Hashtag Respect Talent. But while social media celebrated, Amara Daniels was already deep in the next fight. She stood at the head of a long, polished conference table on the 24th floor of Langston Enterprises. Across from her sat 5 high-level executives, 3 men, 2 women, none of whom looked particularly thrilled to be there. The head of PR leaned forward first. Let me be clear, Miss Daniels. You want the company to fund a musical outreach program targeted at janitorial and support staff. Yes, Amara said, hands clasped calmly. Nationwide. The CFO raised an eyebrow. And how exactly does this serve our shareholders? Amara didn't blink. By investing in your people. Real people. Not just suits and shareholders. The room stiffened. You were hired as domestic staff, another man cut in. This is an unusual trajectory. So was being mocked at a gala and turning it into a cultural shift, Amara replied. If that doesn't qualify me to lead this, what does? Silence. Then the youngest executive spoke. 12 cities. Community instructors. Dedicated practice spaces. You'll be personally overseeing this? Yes, Amara said. I'm not asking for a handout. I'm building a pipeline. And your talent pool? The VP of Operations asked. Where do you plan to recruit? Church basements. Subway corners. After-school programs that never had enough funding. People with more soul in one bar of music than most conservatories graduate in a year. The head of PR exhaled slowly. And if this becomes a media failure? It won't. That's optimistic. No, Amara said, standing straighter. It's a promise. After the meeting, she stepped out into the corridor. Waiting by the vending machine was Mr. Ellis, a night janitor with gray in his beard and calluses on every knuckle. He hesitated. Miss Daniels? She turned. Yes. I watched you play, he said. On TV. Moved me. Thank you. I used to play a bit. Back when I thought it was worth something. He chuckled sadly. Then life said otherwise. Life lies sometimes, Amara replied. You still have hands. You still have ears. That's all you need. He smiled faintly, eyes glistening. You really believe that? I live by it, she said. And soon so will others. He looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. Keep going. We're watching. That evening, Amara returned to her modest apartment. Not glamorous, 3rd floor walk-up, cracked windowsill, a radiator that whined at night. But in the far corner, like a quiet witness, stood her upright piano. A little out of tune. 2 chipped keys. But still standing. She sat. Lifted the fallboard. Her fingers hovered over the keys, and for a second, she heard her mother's voice in her head. When the world's too loud, play softer. Make it listen. She began. Not a performance. A memory. A melody she once wrote in a laundry room between shifts. She let it breathe. Let ache. Then she stopped. Wrote down 2 new measures in a notebook beside her. Outside the city pulsed. Sirens. Life, unbothered. But inside that room, The Maid the world had tried to ignore was building something. Not just a program. Not just a campaign. A legacy. And this time, they were listening. The next morning, Amara walked into a community art center in Harlem. Paint peeling, posters faded, but the baby grand piano in the corner gleamed like someone still cared. She greeted the director, Mrs. Alvarez, a retired music teacher with thick glasses and a clipboard like a weapon. "You really think people will come?" Mrs. Alvarez asked, skeptically eyeing the empty rows of folding chairs. "I don't think," Amara said. "I know." At 10:05, the doors creaked open. By 10:15, 8 people had shown up. By 10:30, there were 35. Young and old. A man with grease-stained overalls. A grandmother holding her grandson's hand. A teenager with earbuds still hanging from her neck. They came cautiously, silently, like hope was something you didn't want to break just by walking in. Amara stepped to the front. "This is not a concert," she said. "And it's not a favor." She looked around. "This is your audition to remind the world that talent isn't tied to money, privilege, or where you park your car." A few people laughed softly. A girl raised her hand. "What if I've never played before?" Amara nodded. "Then today's the day you start." She walked over to the piano and gestured. "Who's first?" The room went still. Then the old man from the back stood up. "I played sax," he said gruffly. "Never touched a piano." Amara smiled. "Then sit down." He did. She showed him middle C. Then let him find it again with his own hands. Others watched. Some leaned forward. One woman quietly wiped a tear. By noon, 5 people had taken the bench. By 1 p.m., 12. And by 2, Amara knew the spark was real. It wasn't just a media wave. It was a movement. A movement born from dust and neglect. That evening, back at Langston Hall, Richard Langston stared at his office monitor. A live stream from Harlem played on mute, Amara with her sleeves rolled up, helping a 6-year-old find rhythm with just her fingers. His assistant, Nadine, hovered nearby. "You're really letting her run with this?" she asked. He didn't look away. "She earned it." "You've never approved anything without a full board vote." "She didn't need permission," Richard replied. "She needed a piano." He clicked the screen off. And smiled. Not the smile of a billionaire who just saw a PR win. The smile of a man watching something bigger than himself begin. The Langston Music Hall had never looked like this. No red carpet. No champagne. No press. Just rows of folding chairs, a gleaming grand piano under one sharp spotlight, and a room slowly filling with people who usually cleaned the building after hours. Amara stood near the stage with her clipboard, giving quiet directions to the sound technician. Her outfit was simple: black shirt, slacks, flats. Tonight wasn't about appearance. It was about who dared to step forward. The invitations had gone out quietly, just a simple email. Talent night, open to all staff. No experience needed. Come as you are. Most executives ignored it. The ones who didn't sent interns to monitor. But by 6:45 p.m., more than 80 people had shown up. Janitors. Cafeteria workers. Mailroom staff. Some brought family. Others came alone. Richard Langston wasn't expected to attend. No one even mentioned his name. But a few minutes before the lights dimmed, he walked in without a word, took a seat in the back, and nodded once when he saw Amara. She didn't react. She had work to do. "First performer is ready," a young intern whispered to her. "Send him up," Amara replied. Darren, one of the overnight custodians, walked nervously onto the stage. He was barely 22, with oversized work boots and shaking hands. He sat at the piano, unfolded a worn piece of paper, and stared at the keys like they were about to judge him. No one spoke. He started playing. The first few notes were clumsy, but he found his rhythm halfway through. It wasn't perfect. It didn't need to be. What came out was raw, a song about exhaustion, longing, and walking home alone while the city lights blurred overhead. When he finished, he stood quickly, almost embarrassed. The room clapped. Not out of politeness. Out of surprise. Out of respect. Amara gave him a thumbs up from the wings. "You did good," she said as he passed her. The next act was Gloria from the laundry department. She sang an old gospel song, voice raspy but full of power. Then came a young security guard who recited slam poetry, followed by a woman from catering who played the violin like it was part of her arm. Every performance chipped away at something invisible. The room, once stiff, now buzzed with energy. People leaned forward. They whispered to each other between acts. Smiles appeared where silence had lived too long. Amara checked her watch. 2 acts left. She glanced toward the back. Richard was still watching, arms folded, face unreadable. Next up is Carl, the intern said quietly. Been working janitorial since the 80s. Carl stepped onto the stage with steady steps. He wore a faded uniform and carried no sheet music. When he sat at the piano, he looked at the crowd and spoke. This song's for my daughter. She passed 2 years ago. I never played it for anyone before. Then he began. It was slow, deliberate. No fancy flourishes. Just pain, love, and years that never came back. Halfway through, the auditorium fell silent in a way that felt sacred. By the time he finished, no one moved. Then the applause came. But lasting. Carl stood, nodded once, and left the stage with quiet dignity. Backstage, Amara wiped at her eyes quickly. He's the heart of this whole night, she said. She stepped on stage to close the evening. This wasn't about showcasing talent for executives. It was about reminding each other that brilliance doesn't wear name tags. It doesn't sit in boardrooms. Sometimes it sweeps floors, hauls trash, and hums in the elevator when no one's listening. The audience stood, clapping. As Amara stepped down, she passed Richard, who had left his seat in the back and now stood at the front aisle. He didn't say anything, just gave her a nod. Not the kind of nod from a man with power. The kind from a man who finally understood he'd seen something he couldn't buy. And Amara walked away knowing one thing. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a stage no one could take from her again. Richard Langston's phone buzzed nonstop from the moment he opened his eyes. Texts, voicemails, email alerts, they all pointed to one thing. The talent night performance had gone public. Somehow, a full video of Carl's piano tribute had leaked online overnight. The clip showed every second of his performance, from the first trembling notes to the roaring standing ovation. But it wasn't just the music drawing attention. The title of the video said it all. Janitor stuns billionaire's company with piano tribute to late daughter. By 7 a.m., it was trending. Major news outlets picked it up. Influencers reposted it with captions like, "This is why we need to listen to the overlooked." Twitter exploded with comments praising Carl's talent, the emotional impact of the piece, and the raw humanity that had been missing from corporate events. But just as quickly, the criticism poured in as well, directed not at Carl, but at Langston Industries and its leadership. Commenters asked how a janitor could go unnoticed for so long, and why it took a housemaid's initiative for the company to showcase something so meaningful. At 8:15 a.m., Richard stood in the boardroom facing 12 senior executives who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. The video played on the large monitor behind him, paused at the moment Carl lifted his fingers from the keys. Amara could be seen standing to the side, arms crossed, quiet, but proud. Charlotte, the head of communications, adjusted her glasses and spoke first. The press is waiting for a response. We've got 3 major outlets asking for comment. They want to know who Carl is, who organized the event, and whether this was some kind of PR stunt. Richard didn't answer immediately. He looked at the screen for a moment longer, then turned to face the group. You all watched it? Heads nodded slowly. Then you know this wasn't about PR. This wasn't planned or polished. This was real. That's why it hit. Harris, VP of Operations, leaned forward. So what do we do now? Promote every janitor with a hobby? Let the cleaning staff run next quarter's earnings call. Richard didn't take the bait. We start by acknowledging that we've been blind to the talent we walk past every day. Carl played that piano from a place no executive here could have reached. And the person who made it happen? She isn't in this room. Someone muttered, "You're not serious." "I'm completely serious," Richard replied. He picked up a file and dropped it on the table. "We're launching an internal talent fellowship. Funded entirely by me. Employees from any department can apply. Artists, musicians, writers, anyone who's never had a platform, now they will. Who's running it? Charlotte asked. Amara Daniels, Richard said firmly. The room shifted uncomfortably. One executive cleared his throat. With respect, sir, you're putting a housemaid in charge of a company initiative? No, Richard replied calmly. I'm putting the only person in this building who actually recognized greatness in charge. She didn't need a title to do something extraordinary. That's leadership. He didn't wait for a response. He walked out. Downstairs, in the break room, Amara sat at a small table surrounded by other employees. Some she knew, others she didn't. People kept stopping by to thank her. Gloria hugged her tightly. Darren gave her his seat and patted her shoulder. Olivia from accounting said the video made her cry. Marcus from facilities told her it was the first time he felt proud to work here. Then a young assistant entered and said, "Miss Daniels, Mr. Langston would like to see you in his office." The room went silent. Amara stood, wiped her hands on her skirt, and walked to the elevator without a word. When she entered Richard's office, he was standing by the window, staring out at the skyline. He didn't turn around immediately. "You caused quite a stir," he said. "I didn't mean to," Amara replied. "That's why it worked." He finally turned, looking directly at her. "You did something none of us even thought to do. You saw him." Amara said nothing. He walked to his desk and slid the folder toward her. "That's the proposal. A real program. Full control. Budget included. You lead it." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Me? Yes. I thought you might be calling me up here to let me go." Richard gave a small smile. "That would have been easier, wouldn't it? But you're not being fired. You're being promoted." She opened the folder, scanned the pages quickly, then looked back at him. "You're serious?" "Completely. You report only to me. I won't interfere. Just build something honest." Amara hesitated. "What if I mess this up?" "Then you'll mess up doing something that matters. I'll take that risk." After a long pause, she nodded. "All right, I'll do it." That afternoon, Richard stood at a podium in the main auditorium, with Amara on one side and Carl on the other. The press had been notified just hours before, but the room was already filled with reporters and cameras. Richard gave a short speech, acknowledging the moment, the performance, and the truth that had been uncovered. "We've spent years trying to perfect our brand," he said, "but it took a janitor and a maid to remind us who we are." He gestured to Carl. "This is what talent looks like. Unfiltered. Unpackaged. And from now on, we're going to find it wherever it lives, not just where we expect it to be." Carl stepped forward, nodded politely, and sat at the piano that had been wheeled onto the stage. He began to play, not for a crowd, not for applause, but because the music needed to be heard again. The room was packed. Reporters filled every seat, cameras were positioned at every angle, and flashes fired every few seconds. Langston Industries had never called an impromptu press conference before. That alone had drawn national attention, but it was the leaked video that brought the real frenzy. Every outlet wanted a statement from the man at the center of it all, Richard Langston. Behind the curtain, Richard adjusted his tie and glanced at his reflection. For the first time in years, he didn't see a polished CEO. He saw a man trying to fix something broken, not just in the company, but in himself. Next to him stood Amara, no longer in her maid's uniform. She wore a simple navy dress and held a small notepad in one hand, though she hadn't written anything on it. "You ready?" Richard asked. Amara nodded once. I don't know," he admitted, "but I'm not hiding anymore." The event coordinator gave them the signal. Richard stepped onto the stage to a wave of murmuring. He stood behind the podium, cleared his throat, and began. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. I'll keep this brief. Last night, something happened in this building that reminded us all what truth looks like. It wasn't a campaign. It wasn't a pitch. It was a moment of honesty. And it didn't come from a board member, or a consultant, or even me. It came from two people this company had never seen properly, until now." He turned slightly, motioning to Amara, who remained off to the side. One is a janitor. The other is a housekeeper. Both are employees. But they're more than that. One brought the music. The other made sure it was heard. He paused, letting the words settle. I've spent most of my life trying to maintain control. Of my company, my reputation, my image. But in doing so, I lost sight of the people who actually give this place meaning. So today, we begin to fix that. He held up a folder. This is the Amara Fellowship, an internal arts initiative to discover, support, and fund creative talent across all levels of this company. Amara Daniels will lead it. She has full authority, full resources, and full support. Because she's earned it. The cameras clicked furiously. Someone called out, "Will she still be a maid?" "No," Richard said firmly. "She'll be Executive Director of Creative Development, effective immediately." A ripple of surprise moved through the crowd. Another reporter stood. "Was this inspired by your daughter's memory?" Richard's expression softened. "Yes. Claire loved music. She believed in people. And I failed to carry that belief forward after she passed. What Amara and Carl did, brought that part of her back into this company. I won't let it disappear again." Amara stepped forward now. She didn't approach the podium, just stood close enough to be heard. "I didn't do any of this for recognition," she said quietly. "I just saw someone who had something to say. And I knew what it felt like not to be heard. That's all." A reporter asked, "What made you believe in him?" She looked out at the crowd, calm and composed. The way he cleaned the piano, like it was the only thing in the room that mattered. People don't treat instruments that way unless they've lived with music inside them. So I listened. That's all it takes. Just one person to listen. The room was silent for a moment, then a wave of applause broke out, not polite clapping, but something deeper. A few people even stood. After the press conference, Richard, Amara, and Carl walked together through the back hallway of the auditorium. Carl had stayed mostly quiet, but now he finally spoke. "You didn't have to do all this, sir." "I know," Richard said, "but it was time someone did." Carl nodded slowly. "It won't change overnight." "No," Richard agreed. "But it's a start." They reached the exit doors. The afternoon sun poured in through the glass. Reporters were still gathered out front, waiting for more photos, more quotes. Richard looked at Amara. "You want to face them?" She shook her head. "Not today." He smiled. "Me neither." They turned and walked back inside. The evening was crisp as guests began to arrive at the Langston Gallery. It had been closed to the public for over a year after Claire's passing, its doors locked and lights dimmed. Tonight, it was open again, not for an elite gala or a curated exhibit, but for something different, an event titled simply The Forgotten Genius. The invitation had gone out only 24 hours earlier, and yet the gallery was full. Richard stood near the main entrance, watching as guests moved from piece to piece. Each display was a combination of visual art, handwritten notes, and audio recordings. But at the center of the room, surrounded by soft lighting and silence, was the restored Steinway. It gleamed under a spotlight, untouched for now. Carl stood near the edge of the crowd, shifting uncomfortably in his black suit. He had tried to convince Amara to cancel this. Too much attention too soon. But she had only smiled and told him, "You deserve to be seen." Amara arrived moments later, wearing a fitted black dress and no makeup. She didn't need it. Her presence alone commanded the room. She made her way directly to Carl, ignoring the looks and whispers. "You okay?" she asked. Carl nodded but kept his hands in his pockets. "This ain't really my thing." "It is now," she said. "Go sit." He blinked. "Sit where?" She pointed to the bench in front of the piano. A quiet fell over the room as guests began to realize what was happening. The crowd shifted slowly, surrounding the piano in a wide circle. Richard stepped forward and gave a short nod to Carl, then stepped back. Carl approached the Steinway like it was a living thing. He paused, wiped his hands on his pants, then sat. His fingers hovered above the keys. For a moment, no one breathed. Then he played. Not a flashy entrance. No dramatic crash of chords. Just a simple melody, something soft and nostalgic. A piece he'd written years ago but never shared. The room fell completely still. Conversations stopped. Phones lowered. Even the click of camera shutters seemed to disappear. Only the music remained. As he played, faces in the crowd shifted. Skepticism turned to wonder, then to reverence. Some closed their eyes. Others looked at him like they were seeing something they never thought possible. Richard watched from the back. His eyes weren't on Carl. They were on Amara. She stood with her arms crossed, not in defense, but in calm pride. She didn't need applause. She just needed this to happen. When Carl finished, the silence held for a second longer, then applause erupted, not polite or obligatory, but genuine. But sustained. A standing ovation in the middle of a gallery. Carl stood stunned. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He simply bowed his head once, then stepped away from the bench. Amara met him halfway. "That's who you are," she whispered. He nodded, unable to speak. Afterward, people came up in waves. Guests, journalists, even a few industry professionals asking where he'd studied, who had trained him. Carl answered politely but stayed close to Amara's side. Later that night, after the guests had left and the lights were dimmed, Richard joined them by the piano. "You've changed this place," he said. "And me." Carl looked down. "I didn't mean to change anything." "You didn't," Richard replied. "You just played. That was enough." He looked at Amara. "You made this happen." She smiled, tired but at peace. "It was already there. I just uncovered it." Richard rested a hand on the piano. "We'll keep this room open. Permanently. Not just for performances, for any employee who wants to create, reflect, or just sit. It's time this building had a heart again." Carl looked around, the gravity of the moment finally hitting him. "Do I still gotta mop floors on Monday?" Amara laughed. "Not unless you want to." Richard smiled. "We'll talk about job titles later. For now, just enjoy tonight." The three of them stood there for a while, in silence, surrounded by echoes of music and a room full of quiet triumph. The next morning, Carl arrived at the office early. He hadn't slept much, not from nerves, but from energy. The kind of deep, charged awareness that something irreversible had happened. The world didn't feel the same. He wasn't invisible anymore. He pushed open the door to the music room, no longer the forgotten exhibit, but a warm, sunlit space. Amara was already inside, seated on the bench, flipping through a folder of handwritten sheet music. "You're early," she said without looking up. "So are you." She closed the folder. "Couldn't sleep either?" He nodded, stepping closer. "Everything feels loud." She tilted her head. "Loud good or loud bad?" "Good," he said. "But still loud." They sat in silence for a moment, then Amara pulled a letter from her bag and handed it to him. The envelope was old but sealed. Claire Langston's handwriting was unmistakable. "What's this?" "She left it with me the last week she was here. Told me to give it to you when the time was right." Carl didn't move. Amara placed it gently on the bench beside him. "I think she meant now." He stared at the envelope for a long time before finally breaking the seal. The paper inside was delicate, the ink slightly faded, but the words were strong. "Carl, if you're reading this, it means you finally played. And it means someone finally listened. I never doubted your gift, not for 1 second. What broke my heart was watching the world convince you it wasn't worth showing. That's why I did what I did. I pushed, I joked, I made promises, because I knew one day you'd stop hiding behind silence and mop handles. You were never meant to be invisible. If Richard's reading this with you, tell him I said he owes you more than a paycheck. He owes you a stage. With all my heart. Claire." Carl folded the letter slowly, his hands shaking slightly. Amara didn't speak. "She didn't need to. I didn't know she believed in me like that," he said quietly. "She did. Fiercely. Even when you didn't believe in yourself." He set the letter down, exhaled slowly, and stared at the keys in front of him. "She wanted me to have a stage. And now you do," said a voice from the doorway. Richard stood there, holding 2 coffee cups. He stepped in, handed one to Amara and the other to Carl, then took a seat on a nearby stool. "I read the letter," he said. "I didn't know she'd left that for you. I'm still trying to understand why, Carl said. Because she saw you, Richard replied. Really saw you. Not as a janitor, not as a charity case. As a musician. A genius. Someone who deserved the room. Carl shook his head. That's a big word. It's the right one, Amara said firmly. Richard leaned forward. We're launching a new series at the gallery. Monthly showcases. Employee-led, community-based. Music, poetry, visual art. And you're opening the first one. Carl looked up, startled. Me? You, Richard repeated. 1-hour concert. Anything you want to play. The space is yours. Carl didn't answer right away. He looked at the room, at the sun spilling across the floor, at the piano that had once been locked away like his own voice. Finally, he nodded. I'll do it. Amara smiled. She'd be proud. No, Carl said. She already was. Later that day, while Amara updated the promotional materials and Richard met with press, Carl sat alone in the music room. He pulled out a blank sheet of paper and began to write. Not music this time, but words. A title. The performance wouldn't just be a concert. It would be a dedication. A goodbye. A thank you. He wrote, Claire's wish, a concert in her memory. He placed the paper above the keys and played the first few bars of a piece that had been living inside him for years. It wasn't polished yet, but it had heart. It had her. He didn't need applause. He didn't need permission. He just needed to play. The night of the concert arrived with little fanfare, but the gallery was filled to the edges. Every chair taken. People stood along the walls, spilling out into the hallway. Guests from the board, local musicians, longtime employees, even members of the maintenance staff who'd never stepped foot in the exhibit wings, they all came for Carl. Backstage, Amara adjusted his collar. You okay? Carl nodded slowly. I will be when it's over. You've played harder things in harder rooms. But never for me, he said. That's what makes this terrifying. She smiled. Then let it be terrifying. You earned that too. He stepped onto the stage. The lights weren't bright, just enough to make the space feel intentional. No podium. No speeches. Just a bench. A piano. And silence. He sat down and exhaled. This one's for Claire, he said into the mic, then began to play. The first piece was slow, almost hesitant, like someone testing the ground beneath their feet. But as the minutes passed, the music swelled, grew bolder. Each chord spoke, answered, questioned, resolved. He played with clarity, precision, and emotion that hit harder than words ever could. No theatrics. No flourishes. Just truth. He ended the final note of the third piece and stood. The applause was thunderous, but he didn't bow. He stepped aside and turned toward the wings. Amara, he said simply. She looked stunned. What? Come here. The crowd hushed. Amara slowly walked onto the stage, confused. Carl pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket. This wasn't part of the program. But I've waited long enough. He faced her, voice clear. Everyone in this building knows I mop floors. They know I can play piano. But only you knew I could matter. Amara blinked. You saw me when no one else did. You stood up for me. You challenged me. And you reminded me that I wasn't born to be silent. He took her hand. I don't have a mansion. I don't wear suits. I don't even own more than 2 pairs of good shoes. But I know how to show up. I know how to love. And I know I want to spend my life playing beside you. He knelt. The audience gasped. Amara Daniels, he said, will you marry me? She didn't move at first. She looked at the crowd, at the piano, then back at him. Then she laughed, a short, incredulous sound, before nodding. Yes, Carl. Of course. The room exploded into applause. Richard clapped from the back, his grin wide. Even the security guard near the door was wiping his eyes. Carl stood, kissed her hand, and wrapped her in an embrace. Later, after the crowd had cleared and the chairs were stacked, they sat together on the bench. The lights dimmed. The world quiet. You know, Amara said, resting her head on his shoulder, you really know how to steal the show. He chuckled. Did I? You proposed in front of the entire board. I thought about doing it alone, he said. But then I remembered. I was done hiding. They didn't say anything else. No need. The keys didn't need to be played tonight. They'd already said everything. Together. If this story moved you, if Amara's strength and Carl's quiet genius reminded you that greatness often hides behind the most humble uniforms, then leave us a comment and tell us where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories about justice, love, and second chances. Because sometimes, all it takes is one song to change everything.